Darkness before you and chaos behind you. In hubris and weakness, the bright star will blind you. My name is Shannon, and unfortunately, Amanda can't be with us today, but we both welcome you to a world of bookish adventures. Today, I am so excited to have indie author Jared Michaud with us. Jared's upcoming book, Brightstar, which is set to release on April 16th, is a young adult science fiction book. It tells a story of Nate, who is an autistic boy from this world that is ripped from the prison of his unbearable daily life and thrust into a different universe whose very foundations are built on mysterious forces. He has no memory of his past, and his autism is refocused and transformed into a near superpower. Caught up in a mission he can barely recall from his shattered memories, Nate must learn to live an entirely unfamiliar life filled with difficulties and some monsters he could never have imagined. Existence in this new galaxy with new friends is a challenge, especially with powerful enemies and sinister forces attempting to destroy everything around them. Most important of all is the critical lesson. So, welcome, Jared. We are so thrilled to have you with us today.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
I'm so excited that you're with us and thrilled that you're there for our first episode of season 2. And I cannot wait to get in and talk about your book just from reading blurb about it. I am so excited. But before we get too far down that path, Jared, why don't you share a little bit about yourself for our listeners?
Absolutely. So I I'm live in rural Wyoming. I'm married with 6 kids, and I started writing when I was very young, about 12. I think I started writing my first book, and I got 250,000 words in when I was about 16 and decided it was totally unpublishable, was not worth the paper it was printed on. Totally worth the time though. That's how you learn how to write, is by doing it, and that's how I did it. And so I loved to write, but I kind of put it down for a while, tried again when I first got married, and it didn't do what I thought it should, and then put it down for a little while longer, worked on other projects, and finally picked it back up and finished my first novel. What was it? It's been about a year now since I actually finished the first novel. And so that's how I sort of got started writing. And I gotta say, it has been quite the experience. It's like drinking from a fire hose, but I love to learn. So
I love that image, drinking from a fire hose. You know, we need it, but oh my gosh, the journey that it sounds like it's been for you over a majority of your life, kind of getting to this point where you're at right now.
well, you know that comic, the one with the what it should look like start to finish, and you're just walking or running a straight line, and then the other one where you've got all of the ups and downs and the boating and the biking and the rappelling and all the stuff you have to do to get there. You've seen that comic. That's totally true. That's exactly how it is.
I love that. I love that image. And so we are here today to talk about your upcoming release, Bright Star, the young adult science fiction book. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Absolutely. I suppose the first thing to know is some context. Bright Star originated when I was very young. That whole world was one that started when I was young. I loved to read, I loved to explore stories, and eventually I created my own world, my own universe in my mind, in my imagination. And I would have adventures there every night before I would go to sleep. And that was the Energemetra 6 universe. It was sort of an early iteration of it, but Bright Star was a character there at the time. And when I was 12, I started writing the prequel to Bright Star. It was supposed to be the prologue, but it ended up being a prequel. And so finally, I got started on this story, and you know, I don't know about other authors, but for me, this journey was kind of strange and wonderful all by itself, because I started the story out and it was going to be kind of a straightforward adventure story of a boy who is transported to this other universe and has these adventures there. And I get about halfway through and I'm thinking about it and I'm like, he's kind of flat. He's not even a real character. And I'm like, well, I know why. It's because we need to know who he actually is and where he's coming from. So the bit about him being autistic came in because I have some of that experience myself. And it wasn't necessarily what drove my imagination early on, but it was part of it. And it has certainly been part of the, what would I say, the journey for me all along the way. And so sharing some part of that, I say there are three things you try to do as a writer. Number one is to share an engaging story, one that entertains your audience. Two is to put some part of yourself into the characters. And then the third is to try to reach out into the world and to bring some truth from out there into what you're doing. And sharing some part of myself as part of Nate's character really made the story actually work and kind of come alive. So when Nate gets into this world, he's you could almost think of it as a Chronicles of Narnia sort of situation where he's transported from our world to a totally different world. And part of that is a moral lesson for him on what it is to be a human being and how to live. And you get to experience that as the book goes on. But I tried not to make that like, I tried not to major in that so much as just to have an entertaining story with those elements in it, sort of to inform things and to provide context. And I thought it came out pretty well considering.
And you should be. I mean, this is like your seventh child, that you have just carried for quite a while. And I love how you shared about Nate, how kind of Nate evolved as you're writing. One of the things as an ARC reviewer, I look for is strong character development. In order to get that 5 stars from me, that's one of my kind of criteria that I look for is really strong character development. Yes, I want to follow the main protagonist through the adventures and journeys that they're in, but I also want to be on their side. I want to root for them. I want to
Right.
feel like, that we have some form of a connection. So it really sounds like you took that time to really develop Nate as a full blown character. And then now we're just along for the ride as he's going through his adventures.
That's the hope. And, as far as character development goes, I had this kind of strange experience, and it's a fun little story. When the publisher agreed to publish the book, because this isn't self-published, it's kind of a small publisher, sort of a hybrid publisher. And when they agreed to publish it, they said I'd sent them 110,000 words, and they said, "This is too long. We need something that's about half this long for a YA market." And I sort of scratched my head for a minute, and I'm like, well, okay, I wrote it episodically. Maybe I can kind of cut this in half and rework the first half to be the first book and rework the second half to be the second book. So the one thing that I'm not as satisfied as I'd like to be with the first book is that it doesn't have all of the character development that I had in it for the first book when I first sent it to him. So I still have that second half, and I'm actually getting ready to send it off to an editor pretty soon. So the sequel is incoming, but I didn't get as much character development and sort of development of the plot in there as I would have wanted.
So it sounds like we're getting at least 2 books of this series. Do you anticipate any more that will be attached to it or any spin-offs that will be attached to this world that you're building?
Both, actually. So it looks to me like the first story arc in this universe is going to take about 4 or 5 books to get down. That was what I would intend to be. My dream, I would say, is to publish it all in an omnibus edition in one volume at some point, because that is the first story arc. That's what's immediately in front of me. And then for spin-offs, I already have a couple of short stories that I've written that are spin-offs. One's freely available on my website. I'm sure we'll get there later. Another I'm working on, I've almost got it out as a release for people who are on my email list, which I thought was kind of fun. And then I have a friend who's actually writing a full novel set in the same universe as a spin-off as we speak.
Oh, that's really interesting. I know I love that when I find a book series that I just get so invested in the protagonist or even the secondary port characters that kind of come around. It's like, I want more, I want more. So it sounds like you're going to give your readers that, you're going to give them more.
I sure hope so. As the author, I want to explore these stories more. There's something about it where when you start to do it, the actual process of writing is actually pretty difficult, but exploring the story is the whole point, and you really do want to give your readers more. So I sure hope so.
So, Jared, at the beginning, we were talking, you shared with us that around the age of 16, you started this world started coming to you and you were writing and you were developing this. Is that when your love and passion for writing started, or did it start earlier in your life?
As I recall, the first chapter story I wrote was called The Food War, and it was when I was about 7.
Oh,
So
okay.
I don't even know if I still have a copy of that, but I was homeschooled and I wrote this, and my mom thought it was pretty fun. So she's probably still got it somewhere because knowing my mom, she keeps everything. So it's probably still somewhere. It's really interesting. It isn't actually the writing that I love, it's creating the story. So whether that story comes out in a book or a film or a video game, to me is kind of irrelevant. It's the creation of the universe and the story that I really love. And that started as early as I can remember. I mean, I remember one of my very first memories is playing with toys. I couldn't have been 3 yet because my my little sister hadn't been born yet. I know that. So I couldn't have been 3. And I remember making up these stories even at that time. So it has to have gone back to practically before I can even remember.
Yeah, I think that's amazing. And I feel like that seems to be a real common thread, at least with some of the authors that I've either connected it from being a reviewer for them or on the podcast, that these ideas, these worlds have started from such an early age. And as you've grown and developed and learned more, they start becoming fuller and fuller stories till now where you're ready to publish it. So I
You know,
see definitely has been a journey of love.
absolutely. And you say that about writing. You know what? One of my favorite quotes about writing comes from a guy named Andrew Clavin. He's a contemporary author of mystery. And he says, "You're not a writer because you write things. You're a writer when you become unwell when you don't write things. When it's so much a part of you that you're compelled to do it, and when you don't do it, you become unwell." And I love that because that's just about perfect.
Yes, that's amazing. And so let me ask you, Jared, with as much as writing has been a part of your life, if we have a listener out there who has ideas or has this passion that's starting to bubble up with them, what piece of advice would you give to someone who wants to write but hasn't started writing yet to kind of give them the encouragement to get going?
So 2 or 3 pieces of advice. Number 1, I would not wish on anyone the curse of being compelled to write. So don't feel like you have to do it unless you actually feel like you have to do it. Don't don't put something on yourself that isn't there. It will not make you happy. Being a writer is generally a pretty thankless thing. So if you have that compulsion, if you want to write, if you have the desire to do it, then start doing it. And actually that's something that I would say that I haven't done as much as I should have. I had a friend tell me years ago, if you want to be a writer, you need to keep writing. You need to just keep producing material. And I didn't listen. And if I had listened, I would have several novels by now. And I should, and I could have, but I didn't. So my advice would be just start writing and don't let yourself get stopped by that thing you call writer's block or getting stuck or whatever. Sit down and just write. Make yourself spend a specific amount of time or make yourself sit and face it until you get something down on the page. And if it's garbage, you can throw it away later. That's part of the process, but actually get words on the page. That's what it is to be a writer. Do that. One other bit here, because I don't actually think very fast, but I thinking about the question a little bit, the other bit of advice would be this. When I wrote that first book when I was 12 to 16 years old, and I got 250,000 words in, that's a lot of words. You write that much, you've written something. And when I got done, realizing that it was unpublishable was a huge blow to me. And it shouldn't have been, because anytime you start something, you're going to be bad at it. So give yourself permission to be bad at it until you're good at it. Be prepared to go through the time it takes to learn how to do it right until you can actually like what you've created, because that takes time and you do have to be patient to do it.
Absolutely. And with your new upcoming release, Brightstar, which, of course, all of our listeners out there, we will be part of Jared's release day, and we will make sure that on April 16th that we remind you guys that his book is up and released. So once that happens, where are people going to be able to find your book?
You'll be able to find it wherever you would normally buy books. And this is my opportunity to tell you to pick a local bookseller if you can. Pick a small operator in the area. If you go to a big site, that's okay. That's fine, but I would highly recommend people shop the smaller businesses, because otherwise they go out of business. And you could probably find my book just about anywhere, because it is published through a regular publisher and it is available through normal distribution channels. If they don't have it on the shelves, tell them to get it, because that's actually how my name and my work gets out there.
I love that. And I completely agree with you. I think supporting indie bookstores, just being a part of that process is as important as supporting our authors, because we want to make sure they thrive and they continue. And so, okay. So indie bookstores definitely is where you're recommending people go. If they don't have it for some reason, they're able to request it. Is that what I'm understanding? To request that book from that bookstore?
Just to share my own experience, I went to the local bookstore that's a totally independent local endeavor run by a guy and his wife, and I asked him, "Can you get a hold of this? Can you put it on the shelf for me? I'd be happy to come do book signing, whatever will help you get the word out and get some business for you." And he went and he looked. He said, some books, it's actually it only gives us a few cents profit. It'll depend on how your publisher has this set up. So he went in and he looked, and on the normal, I think it's Ingram, but whatever it is that does distribution for these things, he looked it up and he found it and he said, "Yeah, actually they've set this up right. We can make a good profit on it. We'll get some in and happily partner with you on this." So yes, local bookstores can order it, and if not, you can get it online from any of the normal places.
Excellent. And then also want to make sure all of our listeners know about your social media sites. Where can they find you, Jared?
So my fiction can be found at e6universe.com. The actual base site is energemetra6.com, but good luck spelling that. So the letter E, the number 6 universe.com.
And on our YouTube, just let you know, if you're watching this on YouTube, you're seeing it right in front of you, so it's right there, so you don't have to worry about messing up any spelling or anything like that.
Absolutely. My own my own author site is jarednmichaud.com. That's mostly just for local, or for media appearances and stuff I've done. My social media, you can find me at Jared Michaud Author on Facebook. You can find me at Jared N. Michaud on X. You could also find Energemetra6 on X, and Energemetra6 on Facebook. And I think Jared N. Michaud on Instagram as well, though that one I'm not keeping up with the way I should, maybe.
Okay, so it sounds like you're on a majority of the larger platforms as well as your own sites. And so, again, if you are watching us on YouTube, all of Jared's information is right there for you to connect with them. Now, I know you mentioned a little bit earlier you have a newsletter and things like that. If
Mhm.
people want to sign up or know more, is that something that they can get from your profile, or do they need to go to your social media sites, or where do they sign up for that?
So for the newsletter, the easiest way is just go to the e6universe.com, and I've got an entry form right there. You can drop in your email address and your name and you can get in on it.
Excellent. Well, Jared, I have to thank you so much for being with us today. So before we start to kind of wrap this up, any last minute things that you want to share with our listeners?
Absolutely. There is one thing I'd like to get into just a little, if that's all right. You know, I mentioned the three things that you do as a writer, and the third one being to reach out into the world and to try to find some truth and leave it there for people. That's actually why I write, is to point to the myth that points the way for us as people. When I started my Energemetra 6 X account, I found a random tweet by a guy on there. He goes by Adam Newman's chief of staff or something like that. And the tweet was, some guys choose one book and make it their whole personality. For me, it's Starship Troopers. And the idea behind this is that we as human beings look to our stories to guide us. We may not even realize how much that's true. But as our society has changed and things have gotten kind of crazy lately, so have our stories. So my hope, my vision is to share the story that I find to be most important and to point back to the things that I think are really important, which comes back to the myths that help to build our society in the first place.
I love that. I think that's such a great way to kind of end our day together, because you are now going to be a part of sharing those stories for now and for our future generations. So I think that's fantastic.
Awesome. Thank you for being on. I really appreciate
Yes,
it.
thank you. Absolutely. Thank you so much, Jared. We're so thrilled that you are with us today. And as again, if you are on our YouTube, you're seeing all of Jared's information. So please reach out and connect with him, as well as we will make sure to remind everybody on April 16th to be a part of his release of Brightstar. And as always, we thank you guys for being with us today. Next week, we'll be talking to Maribel McRae, who writes closed door romance books, and her book, The You I Can't Forget, which is a grumpy sunshine romance. So until then, everybody, read more books and then go explore. Have a good day, everybody.